here in Ireland, oocyte donation is legal, but waiting time for the oocyte donors are huge.
Today we're here in Dublin, Ireland, and I'm curious to know, when you speak to patients coming from Ireland, what questions do they usually come to you with before starting treatment?
Our Irish patients, I should say we have a lot of them because of our roots and our connections with Ireland. As I said, I used to be here more than 20 years ago or 20 years ago. And since that time, we still have connections, both with clinics as well as the patients who were successful. Like usually this is the word of mouth. Then patients know experience of the clinics, experience of physicians, and they are trusting them. So, but back 20 years ago, that was an egg donation, what we were famous for here for Irish patients. Now it's more options, including the ovarian rejuvenation, including still the oocyte donation and the mitochondrial replacement treatment, surrogacy as well. So in our facilities in Slovakia, partner clinic in Albania, in Georgia and Ukraine, we can offer them really complex solutions. And having that trust and those connections and previous patients who have best experience, people decide to choose us as their potential treatment option. In general, I should say that the international treatments are very common for different destinations, and from some countries, because of the limitations of law or limitations related to the availability of some treatments. For example, here in Ireland, oocyte donation is legal, but waiting time for the oocyte donors are huge. And when patients, it's not a very simple solution to choose a method of treatment as the oocyte donation. And this, I know that it takes a long time for patients to make a decision, but once they made a decision, if they still need to wait, it is more complex because they're losing the most important. This is their time. And patients are usually not young at this stage. So when time matters, they are open to travel to different destinations, which can solve this solution, solve this question.
Do you ever get questions from patients about, for example, the success rates of treatments?
Oh, absolutely. That's a very important question, actually, because we know that this is not very transparent sphere, because marketing is everywhere. Fortunately or unfortunately. And fortunately, because this is how we can really promote the treatments and the services if we are good in something. But unfortunately, because patients should be really aware about the real statistics, real expectations, and real results, because these are their potential results. So they want to be not like false guided through the whole process. And this is the most important. We know that there are countries where statistics is completely open. Unfortunately, those countries are very limited. Majority of patients, they learn through the marketing numbers, I would say. And this is not really something what they should trust. However, it's very important to be guided through the process and to know the factors which may really impact. And those factors, that's true that they are very, very individual. And specifically, if you're talking about advanced maternal age patients, they are not equal. We cannot range them on age or range them on IMH or FSH or antral follicle count, because they still may have different factors as the immunity, different male factors, different metabolic characteristics, and so on. And all this really matters. So the proper expectations can be only brought by the physician after evaluation the complex case. And then they can be specified during the process of treatment, because we can estimate specific number of eggs being retrieved from the patient, but stimulation is always an art in fertility. So based on the real outcome, we may need to change our expectations or may need to change the protocol or change the approach or recommend the next stages for the patients and different steps. That's also very important. And I should say that if the patients are having already some medical background and the fertility history, and specifically if they were not successful, they need to trust their physician, because longer doctor knows the patient, better they can evaluate the whole situation. If doctor is an open-minded physician, which really is responsible on treating the patient as a patient, individual one, not as a number, and they are not always starting the same protocol without any changes, without any adjustments. So then this is the proper physician who really is responsible for the decision he or she makes. And that's usually the practice how we treat our patients. We learn from their experience, from our experience together, from the clinical case, and we are trying to adjust and improve on every next stage.
Yeah. So it sounds like it's much more complicated than just getting a number.
Absolutely. Like we may have standardized approaches, and we do have them. So one of my responsibilities as the professional responsibility is the medical director at the egg bank, the Ovogene, the global egg bank. So for the oocyte donors, we have a lot of standardization, starting from the inclusion criteria, because that's very important. How we test them, which genetic markers we control, what about their characteristics of age, and not only, like all medical complex characteristics. And then we have standardized protocols based on their anti-Muller reserve, on their antral follicle count. But this is a selected group of good responders. So for this category of patients, we may have standards and they should be followed. But for the individualized group of the patients of advanced maternal age, which cannot be standardized because they are all so different, we need to have individual approach. And this individual approach will work for them the best.
Could you tell me more about why patients in Ireland choose to come to Slovakia for treatment?
So Slovakia is an European country, a trusted destination for medical tourism in fertility as well, in terms of the regulations. So usually once patients are choosing to travel to another facility, another clinics and another facilities in different countries, because they are looking to solve several issues. First is the regulatory sphere in this country, and in terms of the regulations. In Slovakia, we can do IVF for couples which are not as single individuals, but they need to be in the relationships or they should be married. We are allowed to perform oocyte donation, and the oocyte donation is regulated differently in different countries. We do have no waiting list for the oocyte donation, as we are an egg bank and we are having a wide variety of the donor profiles and the phenotypes and the number of oocytes which are immediately available. So waiting time, it's a crucial question for the oocyte donation treatment, and the guaranteed results. So based on the sperm characteristics, we do have guaranteed offers for the oocyte donation. And the guarantee of the blastocyst, that's something what for patients who failed a lot of cycles is a proof on moving to the next stage, to really have an embryo transfer, to get prepared for this embryo transfer and potentially being successful. Oocyte donation is for many years known as the very successful, very reliable and relatively easy treatment, as patients should not have multiple rounds of stimulations, injections, they are not losing time. So that's the benefit of why patients from Ireland may come to Slovakia.
Yeah, thank you. And let's talk a bit more about the egg donation treatment. So for patients who are from Ireland, they're seeking egg donation in Slovakia, for example, how is the process organized with them still living here? What are the stages? What should they expect?
So initially, once patients are looking for the options of the oocyte donation with us, we are giving them an opportunity to choose donor on the database of the donors which we are having, or our coordinator may help them to choose the right donor based on their phenotypical characteristics and their information. What is important to match the patient with the donor, that's the knowledge if this patient is going to share the information about the fact that they used to use the oocyte donation as their fertility treatment to their baby. In Ireland, the oocyte donation is completely open, like known donation. In Slovakia, oocyte donation is anonymous, meaning if patient would like to preserve the decision for the future, either to tell to the baby about the treatment or no, they should not be obliged to do it openly. They should keep this as the medical secret as their family. So this is something what patients may choose for, like the reason. Another reason is the immediate availability. We do have an egg bank and we have immediate available vitrified oocytes. Vitrification, it's a very safe process to preserve the eggs, and this is guaranteed availability of the specific phenotype. What needs to be done, male patients should travel to our destination to produce the sperm, or even sperm can be shipped from Ireland, from their country to our destination. If patient is not available to travel, then we are sowing the oocytes, or we are performing the fresh donation for the donor. We are receiving the cells, we fertilize the cell, cultivate them until the blastocyst stage, and depending on the patient, if they want to do genetic testing for the embryos, it's not always recommended for oocyte donation treatment, but it can be additional security about the fact that we are going to work with the healthy euploid embryos. Then the embryos will be ready to be transferred to the patient. Preparation for the patients can be performed in Ireland. We are having great connections with the clinics and individual physicians here in Dublin, and the coordination of all communication is done through the dedicated chat with our team, including our doctor, medical coordinator, and administrative staff member. So patients will be absolutely guided through all the processes of their treatment, their oocyte donation treatment, and they will come to our facility just for the embryo transfer, which usually requires 3 to 5 days maximum to be away from their home country.
Okay, so overall patients should expect to travel for about 3 to 4 days, and the rest of the process can be coordinated with them staying in Ireland.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. In terms of egg donation, do you offer mostly fresh or mostly frozen cycles, or both? What does this depend on?
We do both, and I would say that gold standard now is the vitrified oocyte donation, even though that some patients still believe that fresh is better. And that's a huge discussion. We had it today on the panel, that either fresh or frozen is better. However, oocyte donation is a voluntary process, and if we are talking about fresh oocyte donation, so we need to understand that if patient chooses this path, then she needs to be aware that the donor herself may change her mind of starting stimulation in the specific time when we would require her to do this. Then the stimulation may have risks of not being synchronized with the dates when patient would like to do this treatment. We may have a specific reactions into the trigger. We may have risk of not receiving as many eggs as we would expect from the donor. So these all are risks of the fresh oocyte donation. In terms of the results and the expectations and the guarantees which clinic is providing, they are the same for either fresh or vitrified cycle, but vitrified cycle is bringing more guarantees on the fact that we know that this biological material is immediately available and patient can come tomorrow to perform this treatment.
Okay, so it sounds like using fresh donors may be a bit more complicated logistically.
It is. It used to be a gold standard for maybe 10 years ago when the vitrification was not that common, and we as a clinics and the embryologist, we learned about the technology of freezing eggs. And while I believe that this myth is coming from the period of the slow freezing, because as it was a time when we cannot freeze any materials. That was like when we started to do IVF, everything was fresh, and we believed that fresh is better than frozen. Then we discovered the method of the slow freezing, and the slow freezing, it's a freezing process like in the fridge. Then the crystals of ice were going inside the cell, and they were potentially risky to destroy the intracellular mechanisms, including the spindle, the nucleus, etc. And then the survival was very low, and survival was lower for eggs because of the fragility and the liquid structure of the cytoplasm of the cell of the oocyte compared to the embryo. So embryo survived better during the slow freezing compared to the vitrification. But vitrification is a totally different method. It's a rapid process of freezing when the crystals are covering the biological material on top with ice, but inside they are same as fresh, and there is no risk of damaging any intracellular components. So this is very safe and very reliable method to preserve biological materials, and there is no difference for survival either for eggs or the embryos in the proper embryological protocols, if they are followed, the medias and the experience of the embryologists.
Yeah. Patients that I speak to, they sometimes are a bit concerned about the survival rate when freezing oocytes. So what I'm understanding is with the new technology and the knowledge we have at the moment, it's not a concern anymore. Am I understanding correctly?
So vitrification is also different, and experience of the clinic, or specifically the embryological team, that's very important step in this, the whole understanding of the processes. So as we are running an egg bank, our embryological team, they are freezing thousands of eggs per month, and they are sowing thousands of eggs per month, and the survival rate is over 95%. If we are talking about facilities where the experience, like a hands-on training and the experience and the protocols for the oocyte vitrification may be not that common or not that professional, we may have potential some losses. So that would, I would also say, depends on the facility partially, and partially on the experience of the embryologist. But as general, the approach and the technology works absolutely reliable and safe.